We're now live.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon. Welcome to the meeting of the Northern Planning Committee. I am Councillor Paul Wynne, Chair of the committee. This meeting is being live streamed, so members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. If any committee member experiences technical difficulties during the meeting, please contact IT on the number you have already been supplied with. Please mute your microphones unless asked to speak and remute after speaking. Only use the chat function to indicate you want to speak, but nothing else, so it is clear who is asking to speak, and because of the debate has to be heard by those listening to the audio feed. Members are asked to ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item if you have not heard all the debate. As Chair, I will interpret the Council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of the remote participation with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making a ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosable pecuniary interests. Can members and officers introduce themselves each time before they speak, so those listening know who is speaking? Members must disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed, which is not included in the register of the interest, and leave the meeting by turning off their camera, muting their microphone prior to the matter being discussed. Right, we'll do the roll call now, starting with Councillor Roy Aldcroft. Roy? Right, we'll move on to Councillor Nicholas Bardsley.
I'm present and I'm the local member for item 10 on the agenda, so I shall make a statement, Chairman, but obviously not take part in the debate, and I shan't vote on the application either.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley. Councillor Gerald Dakin.
Present. I've got no pecuniary interest at the moment.
Thank you, Gerald. Councillor Pauline D.
Hello, I'm Pauline D. I'm responsible for Wem Urban, Wem Rural and Wixall, and I declare an interest in item 6 as a local member and have nothing to add and will remove myself from the debate. Thank
you. Councillor Vince Hunt, can I just interject here? Councillor Vince Hunt has to give his apologies at the start of the meeting. His laptop has crashed not but an hour ago, so they're rushing one out to him as we speak. Hopefully he'll be able to join us sometime during the meeting. Councillor Mark Jones.
Well, I'm Councillor Mark Jones for Caboyne, Salatin and Western Rin, and I'd like to declare an interest in the Canovi Crowmore item. I'm not sure what I haven't got my sheet right in front of me of the item number. Right. I'm chairman of the advisory board, so I was going to stand out for that section.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Pam Mosley. I believe she's having trouble with her laptop as well. So, hello, Pamela, you there? Okay, Councillor Keith Roberts.
Yeah, Councillor Keith Roberts. I'm the member for Radbrook at Shrewsbury. Likewise, on item 5, I'm a member of the board of Conovi, and I'm also a member of Shrewsbury Town Council and Shrewsbury Town Council Planning Committee. So I'll take advice from legal. I'm quite prepared to sit out.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a sec.
Yeah.
Councillor David Vasmer.
Councillor David Vasmer, yes. Councillor for Underdale. I'm also a Shrewsbury Town Council as well.
So you have no interests, okay? Right, and myself. No, Councillor Nat Green. Sorry, Nat, done it again.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Nat Green, Councillor for Quarry and Coton Hill in Shrewsbury. Now, in respect of item 5, I am on the Town Council Planning Committee, and I do have a dispensation to come to a different opinion should I wish to at this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going back to Roy Aldcroft now. Roy?
Don't think he's with us, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Tim. So, yeah, that's that done. Please can the officers now confirm their presence?
Philip Molyneux, Principal Planner.
Kelvin Hall, Principal Planner.
Tim Rogers, Area Planning Manager.
Idris Iqbal, Solicitor.
Miranda Garrard, Solicitor.
Tim Ward, Committee Officer.
Thank you very much. I shall now turn to the items on the agenda. Item 1, apologies. Good luck with that, Tim.
We've had no formal apologies for absence, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. As I said before, I think everybody heard that. Right, can the committee officers read out the apologies, etc. We've done that. Item 2, to confirm the minutes of the Northern Planning Committee meeting held on the 21st of July 2020. I move that the minutes of the previous Northern Planning Committee meeting held on 21st July 2020 as circulated been signed and correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I will now accept these minutes as a true record unless anyone else indicates differently. No, okay. Item 3, public question. Tim, do we have any public questions?
We've received no public questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 4, disclosure of pecuniary interest. This has been dealt with during the initial roll call of the meeting, so that's sorted.
Chair, Councillor Mosley has just joined us.
Okay, right, so right, we'll go to Councillor Mosley. Do you have any interest, Councillor Mosley? No, she's still not working properly. Okay, we'll move on.
Chair,
No,
it's Keith Roberts.
beg your pardon, it's
Chair?
me. I'm here.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yes, I can. Thank you.
Apologies for the lateness. I had IT problems. I have an interest in item 5, which I will make my statement and withdraw from the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're turning to substantive. Sorry, yeah.
Chair, now you're still on item 4. Could I just take advice from our solicitor regarding?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Miranda?
Sorry, Councillor Roberts, it's Idris. I'll be the solicitor for this committee.
Sorry. Okay.
And in relation to item
5.
Item 5. Yes, so
Yeah.
you're a member of the Housing Supervisory
Housing
Board.
Board, and also a member of the Town Council and Town Council Planning.
Okay, well, it'd be up to you whether you think there might be some sort of perception of bias, but purely being a member of the Housing Supervisory Board shouldn't preclude you from being a member of the Planning Committee, considering the application, but ultimately it's a decision for you to make.
Yeah. Okay, so
okay?
it's on my shoulders. Okay, that's
is.
okay. Thanks for that. Thank you.
So okay.
Can we have, Councillor Roberts, can we have a decision which way you're going to go? Are you going to show an interest and leave the meeting or not? Can we have confirmation?
No, just made my mind up. I'm not going to participate.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Right. Right, now we are turning to substantive items. The planning officers present the item and then we'll deal with the public speaking part of the meeting. Then it'll be for the members of the committee to debate. So now we turn to item 5, which is Crowmore House, Frith Close, Shrewsbury. So can the planning officer please introduce themselves and present the item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer. This is an application for the erection of 33 dwellings and associated operational development following demolition of the existing building on the site at Crowmore House in Monkmoor area of which is a company wholly owned by Shropshire Council. Next slide, please. I'll bring your attention to the additional information in the schedule circulated to you yesterday. This advises that discussions have been held regarding the viability of the scheme and what level of contributions the scheme would be liable for. Arising from these discussions, officers propose that the recommendation is revised from that on the committee report to specify that what these contributions would be and what they're to be used for, and the revised recommended recommendation is as per the additional letters, which is grant permission subject to the conditions as set out in Appendix A and a memorandum of understanding to secure 12 affordable houses on site in perpetuity, an education contribution of up to £79,615 to be used at Belvedere Secondary School, and an open space contribution of up to £135,123 to be made to Shrewsbury Town Council to be used at Upton Lane Recreation Ground, and to delegate to the head of service to make any amendments to the recommended conditions and the memorandum of understanding as considered necessary. Members will note that one of the reasons the application has been brought to committee is that the site is owned by Shropshire Council and the proposal is not in line with the council's statutory functions. So in terms of the location, this slide shows the location of the site surrounded by residential properties and Bradbury House care home to the northwest, just outside of the red line area. Next slide, please. This slide shows the footprint of the existing building, which is currently or was latterly a house in multiple occupation. Access is from the western side via Frith Close on the southwestern side of the site. Surrounding houses are a mix of 1- and 2-storey dwellings. Next slide. It's just a closer view showing the footprint of the Crowmore House building. Next slide. I'll just run through some photographs of the site at present. This is taken from the site entrance looking towards Crowmore House. Next slide. This is looking into the site to the west, showing the boundary treatments at the present. Next slide. Looking into the site to the right. Next. This is looking towards the northwest side of the site and the site perimeter. Next. Again, the site perimeter with the Bradbury House just beyond the high hedge to the left of the photograph. Next. This is looking towards the southeastern side of the site and the trees that form the perimeter of the site. Next. This is a view of the rear of the site, and there's a footpath that runs down the southeast side of the site. This is taken from that footpath. And then the next slide. This is looking in the opposite direction with the site on the right hand side, and then you're showing the footpath moving southeast. Next slide. So this is the proposed layout showing the 33 houses. This includes the demolition of the existing building and the 33 houses, with all but one being semi-detached. There'll be 31 2-storey houses with 2 bungalows on the left-hand side of the site, northwest side of the site. The layout, as you can see, retains the existing access into the site and proposes 2 cul-de-sacs heading towards the back of the site with pedestrian links through the site to the existing path to the rear, with pedestrian access and bollards to prevent vehicles from accessing them onto the path. Next slide. The proposal involves the removal of a number of the trees which are present at the moment, with existing hedgerow being retained, and you can hopefully see the in green the tree protection areas showing those elements which are going to be retained from the site. Most of the other trees are proposed to be shown shaded, are proposed to be removed. Next slide. This shows the paving and the hard standing areas proposed. Next. This is the walls and fencing plan. Boundaries would be a mixture of close bordered fencing and brick walls for the property boundaries, and post and rail fencing elsewhere. Next. There's a large amount of new planting proposed around the perimeter of the site, and this includes native hedgerow with new trees within and around the site. Some of the existing tall hedgerow as well would be reduced in height from about 5 metres down to about 1.8 metres. Next. I don't know whether you just want to click through these elevation slides. There's about 8 or so, I think. This shows the external materials to be agreed as part of a planning condition, but are likely to include red brick walls, tiled roofs, and aluminium window frames. So summing up, officers feel that the scheme provides an appropriate mix of house sizes, density and design for the area. Separation distances to the existing houses is appropriate. The layout provides good connectivity in the local area, with 2 parking spaces per dwelling, which is appropriate. You'll see from the report that the initial concerns of consultees regarding highways and tree matters have now been addressed. A construction management plan will be agreed to minimise disturbance during the building works, and 15 new trees will be planted to help to compensate for tree loss. Paragraph 6.7.1 of the report notes that the site could be developed by a private developer with no affordable housing, but this application does propose 12 affordable houses on site. In addition, there will be a financial contribution towards improvements to a nearby play area, and also a contribution to education facilities. In conclusion, officers consider that the proposal represents an acceptable redevelopment of the land for residential purposes, which will provide a number of benefits and is in line with planning policy. Therefore, it is recommended that delegated authority is given for planning permission to be granted. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Any public speakers on this matter have submitted written statements to be read out in accordance with the revised procedure for public speaking. The local member may read their own out or may elect the solicitor to also read theirs. Can the solicitor read out any statements, please? Idris?
Thank you, Chair. Statement from Councillor Pam Mosley.
I'm happy to read that myself. I've said I will read that.
Oh, well, apologise, Councillor Mosley.
Okay, if I may proceed.
Yes, please, Councillor Mosley.
Thank you. As a local member for the Crowmore House site, I've seen the development plans for this site progress through various iterations over the past year or more, and I'm pleased to see it finally reach committee. After Crowmore House became redundant as a care home some 3 to 4 years ago, and the building, whilst relatively new and well built, was not one which could be readily adapted to a new use, it became apparent that another use would need to be found for the site, and housing appeared to be the most suitable option. The site is in a sustainable location and sits within an established and popular residential area. I think the mix of property size is good, and I'm particularly pleased to see the inclusion of 12 much needed affordable homes, including the 2 bungalows, for which there is always demand. My initial concerns in May, in the report before you, centred upon the loss of established trees and greenery and certain design features. The issue of the loss of trees was also raised by a resident, the Civic Society and the Town Council, who have objected to the scheme for this reason. The Council's tree officer also had reservations. Since then, however, after some changes to the tree retention plan, the tree officer has agreed that the scheme is acceptable, and therefore, with a certain amount of reluctance but a degree of realism about the new layout, I think this is acceptable. The situation is improved somewhat by the later introduction of the use of hedging as a boundary treatment between front gardens and the planting of 15 new trees to the site. The scheme before you was amended at a late stage. This amendment removed the bin store and cycle store build-outs to the front of many of the properties, replacing them with planting, which I feel a big improvement. Other changes in the development of the scheme improve the issue of overlooking existing homes which surround the site, although I feel this will remain an issue with some neighbours, as two-storey houses are replacing a single-storey building. Schools in the area are popular. The report states that the local primary school, which is Belvedere Primary, has capacity, but I'm not sure this is the case in all year groups, and other local primary schools also have capacity issues. Belvedere Secondary School has been oversubscribed for a number of years in all year groups. As such, I'm pleased to see a contribution to education from this development. Due to the size of the development, I feel that a contribution for funding for improvements to Upton Lane Rec is appropriate rather than the provision of POS within the site. The rec is very close and the improvements here will benefit new residents and the wider residential area alike. The sum of £150,000 for improvements is referred to, which would enable significant works. Figures are given in relation to the viability assessment which cast doubt on this. However, I understand from the case officer that new figures for the viability assessment will be reported in the late representations to committee, which are much closer to the figure proposed. Additionally, I believe that the savings from no longer building the bin and cycle stores may not have been accounted for in the viability assessment, and so will make a positive difference to this financial position. Because the site is surrounded by existing housing and the adjacent Bradbury House, with Belvedere Primary School close by, I would like to see the construction method statement recognising the tight road network around and also school start and finish times when setting delivery times to the site. I also hope that local residents are communicated with throughout the demolition and construction period as to what is happening and when. As such, I feel that the application before committee today has evolved into a very acceptable development, and as such, I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley. Is there any more statements to be read out or not?
No, that's it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in response? Kelvin?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I will now open up the debate for the committee to comment. Please indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak. The solicitor will let me know who is next to speak.
Thank you, Chair. We have an indication from Councillor Dakin.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dakin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not certain where the parking is for here. Is there parking in garages or is it off-street parking? What kind of parking is it? I'd like to go through that again.
Right, should we go straight to Kelvin? Could you just answer that, please, Kelvin?
Thank you, Chair. If we can go back to the site plan. This one, at number 18, yeah. The parking is in front of each of the houses, and then there's also some additional parking along the southwestern side of the site, either side of the site entrance for visitors. So it'd be dedicated parking for each property, and then additional parking for visitors near the entrance.
Is that one or two parking spaces?
2 parking spaces per house.
Thank you very much.
No garages.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for taking. Any more comments?
We have an indication from Nick Bardsley, followed by Councillor Vasma.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Chair. Nick Bardsley. similar question, but if I could just press the case officer, how many visitor parking spaces are there? We've seen this on so many developments. You know, 2 spaces, you've only got to have both parents working and somebody else in the household working, and already there aren't enough spaces. I'd like to know how many additional spaces there are over and above the 2 per dwelling.
Calvin, could you answer that, please?
Thank you, Chair. The site plans don't provide any dedicated spaces. They provide an area for visitor parking, so I don't know exactly how many. It's effectively the number of cars that you could fit into the available spaces. There is obviously 2 parking spaces per individual dwelling, and then visitors would be expected to park in those 2 areas either side of the site entrance. I don't have any specific numbers as to number of visitor spaces.
Thank you, Calvin. It is quite generous, 2 parking spaces in the middle of town anyway, I would have thought. Does that answer your question, Councillor Bardsley? Maybe not, but that's best we can do. Okay. Councillor Vasmere.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Vasmere here. There was a comment about the removal of cycle stores in the latest plan, I think I heard. I just wondered if the planning officer could just give me a brief kind of history about why they were removed, and is there any provision for cycling in this development?
Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you, Chair. The original plans did show storage areas to the front of the properties. These were subsequently removed as part of revised plans that were put forward. I understand that there was some concern over the ability of them to be used when the cars were parked in the driveways, and so they were removed as part of revised plans. There is, of course, access to the rear of the properties for each of the dwellings, where storage areas could be used and constructed in the back gardens if needs be for bike storage and the like.
Thank you. Has anybody else indicated?
Yes, Chair. Councillor D, followed by Councillor Green.
Thank you very much. Councillor D.
Thank you. I'd like to know how wide is the street, and if it's possible for cars to park on the street and still allow traffic to go through, particularly fire engines, ambulance, etc. Because we've had estates built here in Wem, which the highway is very narrow, and it causes quite a lot of problems, because even though there is parking, this sort of new type parking where people could go through an archway into the back of the site, people, they don't use it. They still park on the street, and it causes a lot of problems with people trying to access other properties further on down the street. So, how wide is it highway width, or is there another sort of width for estates?
Thank you, Councillor D. Kelvin.
If we're talking about the parking on the existing residential streets, then there's no restrictions on parking with like double yellow lines or the like, and they are a standard 2-vehicle width road with pavements either side. When I've been past in the past, I've not seen any parking on those approach roads into the site, and I'm therefore can assume that there are other spaces for parking to be used in the local area.
Thank you, Kelvin. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Nat Green. Yes, when this item came before Town Council Planning, I think we quite rightly were concerned about the loss of trees. There there are a significant number that are going to be removed. But now, having seen the application as a whole, and the fact that it is going to be bringing in 33 very vital new dwellings to Shrewsbury, I have to say I am now minded to support this application, and so therefore I would like to say, unless any other member has any counter proposal or amendment, that I would like to move the officer's recommendation.
I was about to ask that. Thank you, Councillor Green. Yeah, are there any more comments or speakers?
There's no further indications, Chair.
Thank you. My next question was, do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Green. So do I have a seconder?
I'll second. Councillor D, put second.
Thank you very much. Okay, to confirm, right, so we will now take a vote. The solicitors will read out the names of the committee members present, entitled to vote, and then confirm the result of the vote. Thank you, Idris.
Thank you, Chair. Can I please remind members that only members that have been present for the whole item can vote. And then now we'll take a vote, which is for a recommendation to go with officer's recommendation, which is to grant permission subject to the conditions as set out in Appendix A, and delegate to the head of service to make any amendments to these conditions as considered necessary, as well as on receipt of the viability appraisal review, to finalise the developer contributions to be secured by a memorandum of understanding. Starting with Councillor Bardsley.
For.
Councillor Dakin.
After me, please.
Sorry.
Philip Molyneux here. Is there an update in any update sheet with regards to the recommendation?
Yeah.
I got the case officer sitting behind me, and she made comment about the recommendation.
Update sheet.
Sorry, yeah, Kelvin Hall. At the beginning of my presentation, I referred to the additional letters and then the recommendation that the recommendation was updated as per the wording in the additional letters to refer to the exact amounts of the contributions and also what they should be used for.
Okay, Philip, you happy with that?
As long as it's clear as the recommend with the update to the recommendation.
Sorry,
yeah.
Tim, did you send me a copy of the? I can't seem to.
Idris, it was in the email that Emily sent yesterday afternoon.
Emily. Okay, just to ensure we have the vote correct. So it's to grant permission subject to the conditions as set out in Appendix A and a memorandum of understanding to secure 12 affordable houses on site in perpetuity, education contribution of up to £79,615 to be used at Belvedere Secondary School, and an open space contribution of up to £135,123 to be made to Shrewsbury Town Council to be used at Upton Lane Recreation Ground, and to delegate to the head of service to make any amendments to recommended conditions and the memorandum of understanding as considered necessary. If it's okay with you, Council, I'll take the vote from the top. So Councillor Bardsley.
For.
Councillor Dakin.
4.
Councillor D.
4.
Councillor Green.
4.
Councillor Vasma.
4.
And Councillor Wynne.
4.
4. I have that as unanimous. Tim, could you confirm?
Yes, Chair, that was a unanimous vote.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Idris. Right, before we go to item 6, I apologise.
Chair, can I just say, it's Councillor Hunt. I've just had a new laptop delivered from Shire Hall, so I would have declared an interest as a member of Cornovii in that item, but I'm now here and I'm now back online for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt, thank you very much. Before we go to item 6, I'd like to apologise to the public. Item 7 has been withdrawn, so that is not coming up today. I apologise for not letting you know straight away. Okay, now we move to item 6, the doctor's surgery, Road and Grove, Wem. Can I have the planning officers to present it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Philip Molyneux, Principal Planner, presenting this application. The application proposes conversion of a building that was formerly a doctor's surgery into one residential dwelling at a property located within Road and Grove, Wem. Members' attention is drawn to the update sheet and the suggested rewording of conditions in consideration of the recently received landscaping plan. The application is presented to committee owing to the applicant being an employee within the Council's Highways Department, as indicated in section 3 of the report before you. There are no objections to being received to this application. Application proposes conversion of an existing structure located within a primary residential area into one single-storey dwelling. The application site as outlined in red on the plan before you. Next plan, please. That is also location plan. Can we go on to the next one, please? Right, that's the proposed block plan. It's showing a detached building in the site. And for members who aren't familiar with WEM, this is not conversion of the only doctor's surgery in there. This was an offshoot of a doctor's surgery, which I understand was based at Clive. Next slide, please. That indicates the proposed front elevation. As members will note, single story, very similar in design to a typical traditional single story bungalow. Next one. That's the proposed rear elevation. Floor plans, please. That's proposed floor plans indicating the bedroom on the side, lounge and the kitchen area, hall and a bathroom. Next one, please. This is a landscaping boundary. We were particularly concerned about the boundary treatment with this being in a residential area with other dwellings around. This office is considered now satisfactory. Next one, please. Now follows 2 photographs of the existing elevations. That's the frontal side, and the final one, please. And that's to the rear of the site. In conclusion, this application proposes conversion of, as you can see, a single-storey structure into a single-storey dwelling that is reflective of the surrounding built environment. The conversion is in a satisfactory manner in terms of scale and design, with no adverse impacts on surrounding amenity and highway matters. The recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions as outlined in Appendix 1, attached to the report, and an amendment to conditions 4 and 5 as indicated on the update sheet. That concludes my recommendation. Sorry, my presentation on this application, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Can the solicitor read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. We don't have any statements.
Thank you very much. You're right, the planning officer was to clarify any points in the response. There is no response because there was no thingy. So, members of the committee, can you now comment, please?
Hiya, Chair. We have an indication from Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously I'm aware of this. I'm sure Pauline will, because it's in Wem, have a few words to say on it, but essentially it's an old doctor's surgery. It looks ideal to be turned into a house. This application, I think, would have marched straight through had it not been the fact that the applicant is a Shropshire Council employee, and therefore it has to come before the planning committee. I think there's another one that's the same. So I'm quite happy to move the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. We'll just thank you for that, Councillor Hunt. We'll just see if there's any more speakers. Anybody else wants to speak on it?
Councillor Mosley, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. It's not absolutely clear, but I take it the vehicular way into the site is from that access from the north through the back of that property with a long tapering access. And the other question is, looking at the photograph from the rear, there is actually what looks like a first floor window. There is nothing upstairs, is there? It is just a window giving light into the ground floor. Is that right?
It's in the loft.
Shall I respond?
Oh, I see. Ah.
Would you like to respond, Mr. Chair?
If you would, please, Philip. Yeah.
Yeah, it's storage space up in the attic space. We've got no proposal before us for any first floor accommodation. And if you go back to the block plan, please. There's no changes to the access into the site. It's an existing access through Road and Grove. Clearly, this was used as a doctor's surgery before. From a high risk perspective, there's no objections because obviously we'll be proposed a single dwelling. Vehicle movements will be reduced. But the plan there shows you where the access will come in off the road to the front of the property.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for that. Any more comments from any of the committee?
Councillor Dakin, please, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dakin.
I know this site very well. I'd like to second the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Dakin. Right, do we have any more speakers on this?
There's no further indications, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we have a proposer and a seconder. So in that case, we can go to the vote. So if Idris, you'd like to read out the names and take the votes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, committee members, can you please vote if you've been present for the entire item? And the vote is to go with officer recommendation, which is grant permission subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1 as amended by the update sheet in relation to conditions 4 and 5. So, Councillor Bardsley?
4.
Councillor Dakin?
4.
Councillor Green?
4.
Councillor Jones?
4.
Councillor Mosley?
4.
Councillor Roberts?
4.
Councillor Vasma?
4.
Councillor Hunt?
4. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me.
Councillor Wynne?
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that application has been passed. So now we come to item 7, which we're not going to do because it's been withdrawn. So we'll move straight on to item 8, Oakfield, Great Nest, Shrewsbury. Can the planning officer present this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer. This is an application for the erection of a single-storey and part first floor rear extension with a portico to the front elevation with internal and elevational alterations. Next slide. The site lies at the eastern side of the village of Great Ness. The nearest neighbouring house is to the west, which you can see on the plan, Ness Hall, which is about 50 metres away. Next. I'll just show some photographs. This is the front elevation of the site. You can just see the just a bit of walling detail to either side of the main elevation as well, to the left and to the right. And then there's a detached garage as well to the left hand side. Next slide. This is the side elevation, which will be the right hand side as you're looking from the front, which shows also part of the existing rear elevation. Next slide. This is the rear elevation of the house. Next slide. And this is a wider view further back, showing the extensive rear garden area. Next. So this is the existing elevations that you've seen on the photographs, showing the walling detail, the detached garage. Next. And these are the existing floor plans, with the front of the house being at the top of each drawing. Next. So these are the proposed elevations. On the top left-hand drawing, you'll see that they're proposing a link between the side of the house and the detached garage. You can just see it in a darker colour, just above the garage roof. That link would provide a space for a gym and link the garage and the house. There's also proposed, if you look on the top right drawing, there's a side elevation shown, single story, and then you'll also see on the right hand side of that wraps around the back of the house into a rear extension, which will be part 2 story. So coming down the bottom left drawing, you can see the new 2-story element of the rear elevation, and also the single story rear elevation as well, with the glazed patio doors. And then you can just see on the right hand side of that the link block between the house and the garage. Next slide. This shows the floor plans, which shows that the proposal would extend the lounge and the dining room to the rear, and also, as I say, provide a link between the house and the garage to provide a gym. Next slide. And this shows the proposed extended house within the curtilage of the house, and shows the distance to the boundaries of the property. So the application is brought to committee as the parish council objects to the application on the basis that it is out of character with the conservation area, and that there's a lack of justification for the increase in scale. In terms of materials to be used, these would match the existing house, mainly brick walls with some render at ground floor level to provide some contrast. The house is set back from the roadside and at the eastern edge of the conservation area. Officers consider that the design and scale of the extensions are acceptable and that the proposal would not adversely affect the character of the conservation area. And you'll note from the report that there's been no objections from the council's conservation team. It should be noted that planning permission was granted earlier this year for a single-storey rear extension and the portico to the front elevation. The difference between that permission and the proposed one is that the applicant want to add the side extension and also an extra storey to part of the rear extension. This one proposes the link as well between the house and the garage. Also, importantly, members should note that a number of extensions to the property could be undertaken under permitted development rights. These include the rear extension could be undertaken, and also the side extension could be undertaken as well. The reason why it requires planning permission here is that the rear and the side is like a wraparound extension, so they're linked. If they were separate, a rear and a separate side extension, then that could be undertaken under permitted development. So overall, officers consider that the proposals are acceptable in that context and recommend that permission is granted subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kelvin. Very good. So can the solicitor read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. There's no statements in relation to this matter.
Thank you very much. None from the Parish Council. Interesting. Okay. Planning officer can't come back. There's no points being made. So members of the committee can now make their comments. Solicitor will indicate who's next to speak. So I'll open up to the floor now. Anybody coming forward?
Thank you, Chair. At the moment, there's no indications.
Okay. Well, if there's no indications, okay, so if there's no indications, I'll go straight on to, if there are no points of planning officers, there's nothing to clarify, points confirmed, nothing to add. If there's no more speakers,
Councillor Roberts has indicated he wants to speak.
I was just going to propose. Okay, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm absolutely flabbergasted here why the parish council have made their comments, and I don't understand the word justification of the increase in size. Anyway, I just think it's a reasonable request to what they've done, as Calvin has already said. Parts of it don't need plan permission, so I'm proposed that that we accept the officer's recommendations, and I propose that we accept it.
Thank you,
second.
I was about to propose, but was that Gerald? Did you come in then?
Yes, I'd like to second that.
Okay, so we have a proposer and seconder. So we'll now take the vote. The solicitor will read out the names of the committee members in turn. Thank you, Idris.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members again, please only vote if you're present for the whole item, and it's a recommendation to grant permission subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1. Councillor Bardsley?
For.
Councillor Dakin?
For.
Councillor D?
For.
Councillor Green?
For.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Mosley?
For.
Councillor Roberts?
For.
Councillor Vasma?
For.
Councillor Hunt? Councillor Hunt?
Oh, looks like his computer's gone again by the sounds of it. It's just.
Okay. Councillor Wynne?
For.
Sorry, Chair, my internet is popping in and out, so I won't vote on this if I manage to stay in the meeting for long enough.
Oh,
Airband, unfortunately, are dropping the ball big time this last week or so. So apologies if I keep disappearing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hunt. Okay, so can we confirm of the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That proposal has passed.
Right, unanimously. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so that has gone through and passed. So now I'll turn to item 9, Braden View, Yew Tree Bank, Bowmere Heath, Shrewsbury, Shropshire. Can the planning officer present this item, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Philip Mullen, Principal Planner, presenting this application. Application is for a legal determination in relation to a single-storey rear extension to an existing semi-detached dwelling. This is actually classed as permitted development in accordance with the General Permitted Development Order, and therefore has to be a recommendation for approval. The application is brought to committee owing to the applicant being an employee of the council, as outlined in section 3 of the report and the scheme of delegation. The application site plan, please. The application site is outlined in red there, semi-detached dwelling. Next slide. That shows the extension onto the side, outlined in red, as highlighted. Next one, please. That's a photograph of the rear elevation with a similar extension to the house next door. Recommendation has to be one of approval, and as I indicate, the application is brought to committee owing to the applicant being an employee of Highway Services. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report on this application.
Thank you, Billy. Can the solicitor read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. We don't have any statements.
I didn't think we would. If we have no, so does the right? Members of the committee can now make their comments. Solicitor will indicate who is next to speak. If there's no speakers, I shall approve it for. I shall propose the approval of it. If there's nobody to speak, it's quite straightforward.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Pauline D, was it?
Sorry, yeah, sorry, Pauline D, I'll second that.
Thank you, Pauline. Okay, if there's no more comments, we'll go straight to the vote, Idris.
Thank you, Chair. Just remind councillors again to only vote if they've been present for the entire item, and the recommendation is one of approval. Councillor Bardsley.
4.
Councillor Dakin.
4.
Councillor D.
4.
Councillor Green.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Mosley.
4.
Councillor Roberts.
4.
Councillor Vasma.
4.
Councillor Hunt.
4.
And Councillor Wynne.
4. So
thank you, Chair. That's unanimous, Councillor. Chair.
Thank you very much. That's passed. Right, we shall go to item now. Proposed dwelling to the east of Ivy Cottage, Walford Heath, Shrewsbury, Shropshire. Can the planning officer present this item, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Philip Mullen, Principal Planner, presenting this application. This application proposes erection of one detached dwelling and alterations to existing vehicle access on land that forms part of the curtilage to Ivy Cottage in Walford Heath, which is a semi-detached dwelling. Members' attention is drawn to the update sheet. And please note the officers fully acknowledge that the site is located within 2 parish councils' administrative boundaries. In fact, I would say 99% of it is within Bastchurch, and about 1% of the site is located within Bowmere Heath. Bastchurch Parish Council objected to the application, and the response is set out in full in paragraph 4.0 of the officer's report. Clearly, they object to the principle of development on site and thus committee consideration of this application. An objection has also been received from Bowmere Heath Parish Council, as referred to on the update sheet. Both parish councils, I'd like to point out, were consulted on this application, and the application followed its normal procedures with regards to consultations on the application. The site is considered by officers to represent a suitable infill site located as it is between recently constructed dwellings to the east of the site. On the plan before you, these are identified as the blue dots because we, at the time of preparing this presentation, we hadn't got the dwellings mapped on the plan. However, I will have a photograph later during the presentation indicating the dwellings that have recently been constructed alongside.
Yeah, right.
And also note the application site forms part of Ivy Cottage, which is located on the other side of the site as indicated. The SAMDEV plan identifies Walford Heath as a community cluster settlement in Pimhill Parish, where development by limited infilling conversions of buildings may be acceptable, and there's a housing guideline of approximately 6 dwellings over the period to 2026, in addition to the 10 as already proposed at the time of the SAMDEV policy being set. When considering the housing figures for the settlement, as of 31st of March 2018, Walford Heath had 8 completed new dwellings and 9 dwellings with plan permission, totaling 17 deliverable new dwellings. The guideline figure was a further 6 in addition to those approved prior to the plan adoption, so already showing an increase over the original numbers as allocated during the plan period. However, it must be emphasised that these figures are guidelines, and the previous refusal for a dwelling on this site in its accompanying officer's report accepted the principle of a dwelling on this site, which is classed as infill development. On this occasion, with consideration to the scale of the dwelling and the location and the SAMDEV definition for housing development within the settlement, officers considered the principle of a dwelling on site acceptable. A significant issue in relation to the previous refusal was the scale and mass of the dwelling proposed on site, and the case officer, in relation to the subsequent refusal of the application, in his report concluded that the proposed detached 2-storey dwelling is unacceptable, which the application site lies adjoining an identified settlement for new development, and the plot is able to constitute an infill plot in accordance with the settlement specific policy. The proposed dwelling is of a scale disproportionate to the site and its surroundings, and is of a design and style that is inappropriate and unsympathetic for its location, in close proximity to historic properties and the adjoining open countryside. Despite the principle of development being established through a combination of compliance with local and national policies, it is considered that the proposed dwelling would be harmful to the setting and character of the host dwelling, the street scene and local environment. I read that out to you because that is a material consideration in relation to the current application under consideration, and during my slide presentation I will indicate the previous plans that were subsequently refused, so that you can compare them to the application before you today. As I also note the objections received from both Bastchurch and Beaumont Heath Parish Council and their reference to housing numbers, but this was not a reason the previous applications were refused. Now, these concerns were also a consideration in relation to the current application, and as a consequence, the applicant has amended the application to indicate a much more reduced scale dwelling, which officers now consider is acceptable. Both the local parish councils have been informed with regards to the amended plans, and although it is acknowledged and appreciated that Bastchurch Parish Council have responded rejecting the principle of development on the site, it is fully appreciated Beaumont Heath also object, as members will be aware from the update sheet. As indicated earlier, site is as hatched on in red before you and does form part of the existing curtilage of Ivy Cottage. Next plan, please. Right, the site as outlined in red to the east of the site with road frontage that is recently completed. There is recently completed residential development, which I'll refer to earlier, but this shows the site in relation to the village as it formerly was. Next slide, please. Right. This plan is shows the dwelling as outlined and the dwellings to the side of it. Note the position of it. It's halfway between existing dwellings that are built near the roadside and Ivy Cottage, which is set back in its plot and has very little ground to its rear. Next plan. These are the proposed floor bands. It's a small 1.5 story 3-bedroom cottage. If you could have the elevation plans, please. Right, the proposal subject to this application is for, as indicated, making use of the roof space for the first floor bedroom accommodation. A major change in the amended plans is the proposed depth of the dwelling reduced from 7.5 metres to 5.6 metres, which has resulted in the dwelling losing a bedroom and now a 3-bedroom dwelling rather than a 4-bedroomed as originally proposed. Next site plan, please. Right, this indicates the plans for the original dwelling which was proposed in site to the previous application that was subsequently refused. Not the original dwelling as part of the current application, but like I emphasised, the one that was refused for the reasons and conclusions as I read out to you earlier in this presentation. Now we have some photographs. These are photographs that were provided by the local member and were included on the update sheet. That shows the settlement and its historic character and why officers considered amended plans were needed in consideration of the current application, which shows a smaller dwelling which is reflective in scale and depth of existing, as you can see on the photographs there. In fact, all three of those built structures are relatively narrow in width and but longer with their elevations. And the final photograph, please. This shows the recent development alongside, which officers appreciate is significantly different and certainly different to the current application under consideration, and hence the reason officers consider the current proposal acceptable in that it's in its interrelationship between what you could call as old and new. In conclusion, we're still acknowledging the letters of objections and the objections from Bastchurch and Beaumont Heath Parish Councils. Officers consider the amended plans received now indicate a dwelling of suitable scale and mass in consideration of the site and its immediate surroundings, and the recommendation is therefore one of approval subject to the conditions as outlined in Appendix 1 attached to the report. And I'd like to remind members to take into consideration the planning history of the site as discussed during this presentation. That now concludes my presentation on this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philip. Very comprehensive. Okay, can the solicitor read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. Statement from Belinda Rutherford, local resident, on behalf of Brian Bensley, Janet Bensley, Craig Broadley, Jennifer Broadley, Ellen Davis, Margaret Davis, John Austins, Jane Austins, Kevin Rutherford, Belinda Rutherford and Rosie Rutherford. Application 9/04589/FUL refused in January, partly on grounds that the width of the dwelling would dominate the street scene, Application 20/01374/FUL shows the same width house, comparing both plot plans showing that the proposed house is the same width. All the points in refusal for 19/04589 FUL still apply regardless of the proposed house having slightly less depth. It still stands forward of the host property, a Victorian red brick cottage adjoining to a red sandstone cottage. There is no design and access statement to indicate why this dwelling is needed in the hamlet. The grid ref map on page 1 of committee report fails to show the 4 large detached houses already built. The location plan is 5 years out of date, failing to show 7 new houses built and groundwork for an 8th, all clustered in one small area. Of the 17 houses currently with the planning permission or built, 14 of them have been built a small area around the crossroads. Despite Wolford Heath predominantly being a long ribbon development on the B5067, this application would only add to the density of development in a small section of the hamlet. Since 19/04589 full was refused, there has been further application 19/05417 out in the hamlet for a detached house and garage to be built. This was granted. Wolford Heath has already exceeded its allocation of 16 houses. An allocation of 16 houses in a hamlet of 32 houses was already an unprecedented increase within Shropshire. How many houses will be granted before it is decided that the cumulative increase and impact is sufficient? That so many residents have made objections to this, and the previous application says much about the cumulative effect of this overdevelopment on Wolford Heath, yet we are consistently ignored. There has been further application to convert the warehouse into 3 properties, making a total of 20 new houses. Much is made of the fact that Wolford Heath was included as a community cluster in 2014 and hence must have amenities. We have a post box and an infrequent bus service. All residents here are fully reliant on cars to access the most basic needs for everyday life. Further housing in the hamlet will be increasing that usage. Wolford Heath is to be removed from the community cluster stated on the revised local plan and returned to open countryside status. 14 of the houses were granted planning permission prior to the adoption of SAMDEV plan, as it was the emerging plan. Then we should have no further applications granted with the new local plan, giving weight as the emerging plan. The hamlet until a few years ago comprised small, low, old cottages and bungalows. All the new houses are large detached houses, dwarf the older houses, and have completely changed the appearance and street scene of this quirky hamlet. We do not wish to have an 18th house built, especially not one squashed into the garden of an old red brick cottage, to be cheek by jowl with a row of featureless red brick houses, creating a street scene of one continuous line of development. Any development should protect and enhance the local character of our natural built and historic environment, and this new application does none of those any more than all the previous development has. We then have a statement from Councillor Sarah Richards on behalf of Bashchurch Parish Council. Bashchurch Parish Council have objected to all the applications submitted on this side and continue to uphold this stance. The area of Wolford Heath was designated as a community cluster with low aspirations for development numbers, 6 additional dwellings. For various reasons, this has been significantly exceeded to the detriment of the settlement, with 17 dwellings completed or underway to date. The original number of 6 was deemed appropriate and realistic. So what has changed to now make it agreeable to continue to grant more and more permissions? In the emerging local plan review, Wolford Heath will be put back into open countryside. That's been agreed by both the parish councils and upheld by the planning policy team. We all know it's a right decision and that further development there should be halted. Much weight was afforded to SAMDEV when it was at this stage of its adoption process, so considerable weight should also be given to the revised position as set out in the local plan review. Aside of policy, this is an undesirable development in this location. The proposed dwelling will be shoehorned between the existing sandstone dwelling and the adjacent development. The sandstone dwellings are part of the historic character of this hamlet, and this heritage asset will be significantly compromised by addition of a new dwelling in such close proximity. The officer report for refusal on a nearby application, in brackets 17/03587 out, stated any additional development atop of the figure has real potential to significantly and adversely impact upon the local infrastructure and community goodwill. Despite the presumption in favour of sustainable development, there are no considerable benefits that materially outweigh the negatives arisen from its non-compliance with MD1. MD3 and S16, and in brackets Roman numeral 15 of the SAMDEV plan. Nothing at all has changed since his decision was issued, so the statement stands as true now as it did then. If we are applying the principles of SAMDEV, the above applies. If we are affording weight to the local plan review, then Walford Heath is in open countryside. Either way, justification for adding another dwelling isn't there. In the most recent refusal on this site, in brackets 19-04589 full, the case officer stated the proposed detached two-storey dwelling is unacceptable. It is considered that the proposed dwelling will be harmful to the setting and character of the host dwelling, the street scene and local environs. On this basis, the proposal is unable to comply with local development plan policies CS6 and CS17 of the adopted core strategy and MD2, MD12 and MD13 of the SAMDEV plan, and it is recommended that permission be refused. The latest submitted plans, 13th of July 20 in brackets, would appear to show that the dwelling has not been reduced in width from the previous refusal, only in depth, which does nothing to improve the street scene. Even with the odd nip and tuck here and there, the overall change to the scale of the street scene appearance is insignificant and, in our opinion, should not justify a change of heart. The block plan shows that approximately 40% of the overall plot is set out to driveway/parking at the front of the property. Visually, this will have the impact of an urban car park, not that of a dwelling in a rural/open countryside setting, and will detract further from the street scene. The fact that so much of the property is set out for car parking clearly identifies that the occupants will be totally reliant on car journeys to access any facilities, as there are no facilities whatsoever within the hamlet. This reliance on car journeys is completely at odds with current policies and highlights the unsustainability of the proposals. In conclusion, Bashchurch Parish Council urge you to consider the cumulative impact of development, the detriment to the existing built form, the unsustainability of the proposals, and request that committee members refuse this application. Thank you. I'm just going to have a sip of water.
I would think. Well done, Andrews. That was a fair mouthful. Do we have any other speakers, as in the local member?
Sorry, Chair, we still have a statement from Councillor Louise Crawley on behalf of Bomere Heath Parish Council.
Right. Okay. All right.
Do you want me to continue?
Yep, please. If you had your drink, yep.
Yep. During the SAMDEV plan, Bomere Heath Parish Council preferred number of houses for the community cluster of Walford Heath, Merrington and Old Woods was 6. During the consultation, Merrington and Old Woods were removed from the community cluster, leaving Walford Heath on its own. At this point, 16 houses were allocated to Walford Heath. 16 houses equals a 50% increase in housing stock. By August 2020, 17 houses have been built or approved. The Bomere Heath Parish Council opposed this application because number one, Walford Heath has already exceeded its allocated housing numbers stipulated in the SAMDEV plan. Bomere Heath Parish Council recognised that Walford Heath has had more than its fair share of new development, and this had seriously affected the goodwill of the community. Bomere Heath Parish Council successfully requested that Walford Heath should be removed from being a community cluster in the local plan review. We respectfully request this is taken into consideration and given weight in the decision-making process. The application is an amended resubmission of a planning application 19-04589 FUL, which was refused by the council on the 31st of January 2020 for the following reason. The proposed detached dwelling is of a size and sale disproportionate to the application site and its surroundings. The amending application has changed little, moving the proposed house slightly back and reducing the size by only 1.9 cubic meters. The applicant is treated this as infill. This can even be considered as infill is only because of the high proportion of houses that have been built in Walford Heath in the last 6 years. The size itself is between Ivy Cottage and a new housing development of four houses, 16/04720/L. Number 5, the density of a housing is out of character for a rural settlement. The hamlet has changed in appearance from a sporadic distribution of varied housing stock spaced out down the B5097 to a much higher density of housing. 14 of the 17 new houses are concentrated in a 50-metre stretch either side of the road towards the Bashchurch end of the hamlet. This application is also situated in the same area. The proposed house is in Ivy Cottage's garden. Will this set a precedence? Will other houses in Wolford Heath be permitted to build a house in their garden? Number 6, Wolford Heath had already been identified as an area of concern for speeding by the parish council, which undertook a traffic survey in June 2017. The results on the parish council website. In summary, a principal road, B5067, which serves the larger developed area of Bashchurch, passes through Wolford Heath. The survey shows an average of 5,000 cars a day use this road, of which 3,934 cars were travelling faster, 46 miles per hour, and 511 cars faster than 55 miles per hour.
Mr. Chair, can I interact a minute, please?
Can just let Idris finish his statement first, please, Philip?
No, well, he has finished the
statement.
Okay. Yeah.
Idris has a lot more to read yet. He has two councillors, local member statements to read. So I was going to suggest to give him a breather to catch his breath.
Good idea. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If we could show the site plan that Councillor Bardsley asked to be included, as I believe Tim has it, and that you haven't seen that, and then that'll give Idris a chance to get his breath back to carry on.
Thank you, Philip.
That plan there now shows the Bashchurch Parish Council site. You'll see the application site outlined in blue, and Beaumont Heath, the other side of the red line. You'll see the bottom corner actually is in Beaumont Heath. Therefore, the site is in 2 parish councils, and accordingly, both were consulted on the application. And that will go some way to explain why Idris has got such a hard time reading out so many statements today. And he now has two statements from both relevant local members.
Thank you, Philip. If I may continue, Chair.
Yep, certainly. Thank you.
So we have a statement from Councillor Leslie Picton, who's a local member. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to object to the application before you. This application site is in 2 Shropshire Council divisions, although I should add that only 1 division councillor and parish council were notified. There is a long history to Wolford Heath. Originally, it was agreed that Wolford Heath should form a cluster alongside 2 other hamlets in Merrington and Old Woods. The number of properties allocated to the entire cluster was 6. When Shropshire Council did not have a 5-year land supply, planning approval was given for 10 large properties within the Wolford Heath hamlets. Since Shropshire Council has had a 5-year land supply, a further 6 properties have been given approval, bringing the total in Wolford Heath alone to 16. A 50% plus increase in the number of properties within the hamlet. The emerging local plan, in brackets 2016 to 2038, is entering the final consultation phase. Within this consultation, Wolford Heath has been removed from the cluster and will now be classed as open countryside. This removal was agreed by the planning policy officers and local parish councils right from the start of the process. Therefore, what weight should the emerging local plan be given in determining this application? It is my view that weight should be given to the 16 dwellings already built in Wolford Heath, and this application should be refused again. I have further objections to this application, and I also ask you to look at the photographs included with this objection. Sustainability. This application is not within a sustainable location. If it was, it would have been recognised as such by planning policy officers, and Wolford Heath would have been included within the new plan. Street scene. Despite the proposed reduction in size of this property, it has a detrimental impact on the street scene. This again was recognised in the last refusal. I am also concerned that the plans before you do not give a true reflection of the site location, as new build neighbouring properties do not appear on plans. Urbanisation of open countryside. The development of yet another new build will further urbanise what was once a small hamlet, with a variety of house styles not in keeping with the character of the village, character and historic setting. This development will do further harm to the character and historic setting of the settlement, in particular the traditional sandstone cottage and the open countryside beyond. This was also recognised in the last refusal. What has changed? Cumulative impact. I believe insufficient weight has been given to the cumulative impact of this proposed dwelling on the surrounding properties and area. This is, in effect, open countryside and should be treated as such. In conclusion, the proposed development does not comply with local development plan policies CS6 and CS17 of the adopted core strategy and MD2, MD12 and MD13 of the SAMDEV plan. I urge you to take on board the comments made by both local members, both parish councils and the residents of Walford Heath and refuse this application. That's the end of the statement, Chair. The next statement is Councillor Nick Bardsley, and I understand he's going to be reading his own statement.
Well done, Idris. Thank you very much for that. Right, Councillor Bardsley, would you like to read yours?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick Bardsley, local councillor for Brighton and Bastchurch. I did have a question, but I warned Philip Molyneux in advance that I wanted to see exactly where the parish boundary runs, and he has supplied that. And if I can answer my own question, and I think Philip's answered it as well, almost the entire site is actually in Bastchurch, and therefore the argument in the officer's report about the community cluster agreed in Pimhill Parish should not in any way influence the decision, because 99% of it is not in the community cluster. I'll read my statement in full, Chair, if I may. I accept that the siting scale and design of the proposed structure have been reduced in scale in this resubmitted application. But in my view, the strong objections to any further development in this location should outweigh these minor changes in scale and design. The conclusion, and I refer to paragraph 7.1 in the case officer's report, relies on the existing but temporary status, and I emphasise only in Pimhill Parish, of parts of Walford Heath as a community cluster in SAMDEV. And you can see that we're talking about 1% of the site. The officer report accepts that the application site does fall mainly, I think the word should be overwhelmingly, within the Bastchurch parish, and that part of Walford Heath that is in Bastchurch has never been in the community cluster. Moreover, both Bastchurch and Beaumer Heath Parish Councils strongly support the redesignation of Walford Heath as open countryside, and it's significant that in the local plan, now at formal consultation, that redesignation has been fully accepted. The proposal runs entirely contrary to any common sense view of sustainable development, in that there are no services or facilities in the locality. Occupiers of the existing dwellings have almost invariably to use their cars to reach schools, shops, doctor's surgery. I challenge anyone to walk from Walford Heath into Bastchurch and emerge alive. Recommendations for refusal in officer reports on recent applications have fully endorsed this view, which is held by both parish councils and the great majority of local residents. The recommendation for conditional approval in this report is inconsistent with those previous refusals. And for these reasons, I respectfully invite the committee to reject the recommendations in the officer report and to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley. Does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in the response?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first, yes, obviously there's been a lot of discussion since my presentation from the various consultee responses and both parish councils and both local members. At the end of the day, the fact remains that this site is part of the settlement known as Walford Heath, and the current SAMDEV policy is the primary policy for consideration. I accept, officers accept the local plan review is suggesting to take Walford Heath out, but this has no bearing on today's decision as it has no weight. I'd like to also go back to the proposed elevations, please, if we could, on the slides, and remind members again after those lengthy discussions with regards to scale and design of the last refused application. Right, go back to the proposed elevations, please. Proposed elevations, please. That's it. Those are the proposed elevations before you today, which indicate what officers consider a small cottage. Now, I'd like to go to the next elevations, which are refused subject to the previous application. There they are. Please note the width of that dwelling. The plans that come in for the current application were a slight amendment of that, which officers didn't think acceptable. Therefore, the case officer, in negotiation with the agent, they amended them to come in with what's proposed before you today, which officers consider is quite a contrast. It isn't tucking around the edges, as officers don't consider, as was suggested earlier, and it's to an acceptable level. And please note the reason for refusal for this application. It is purely on scale and design.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry to interrupt, Philip. Am I okay to just finish off reading the statement from the agent before we continue?
Ah, right. The agents, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, Idris. Yeah, by all means.
Sorry about that, Philip.
Okay.
So, a statement by Mike Lloyd, agent on behalf of the applicant. Comments submitted in opposition to the application refer to local plan review proposal to remove Walford Heath status as a community cluster settlement and return it to open countryside. However, as members will be aware, the review has only reached consultation on the Regulation 18 pre-submission draft of the local plan. The status of Walford Heath in the local plan review has therefore still to be determined, and any decision based on its status in the pre-submission draft will be premature and presumably prejudicial to the further consideration of representations on the issue as part of the local plan review. The application therefore fails to be determined against the adopted development plan, which designates Walford Heath as a community cluster settlement. Several comments refer to the housing guideline of the settlement being exceeded. However, as detailed with the SAMDEV plan, in brackets paragraph 3.21, the guideline figure is not to be regarded as maximum figure. On the contrary, to ensure that the SAMDEV plan meets the overall housing requirement for the plan area, settlement guideline figure should be a minimum requirement. This is supported by national planning policy, which details that the 5-year housing land supply is a minimum requirement and includes the aim to significantly boost housing supply in favour of sustainable development. The insignificant addition of a single dwelling to the community cluster's housing guideline is not, therefore, sufficient reason for refusal of the proposed development. Whilst it is evident that the principle of an additional dwelling in Walford Heath accords with the adopted development plan, concerns have been expressed on the potential impact of the dwelling on the character and appearance of the area. However, following consideration of the reasons for refusal of the previous proposal and subsequent discussions with planning officers, the dwelling proposed is significantly different from that in the previous application. The current proposal is a modest dwelling which seeks to integrate with and provide an appropriate visual transition between Ivy Cottage and the approved dwellings on the adjoining land. The proposed dwelling's height and depth have been significantly reduced, resulting in the dwelling being 1.5 stories with the inclusion of dormer windows and a modest material palette to match local vernacular. Whilst the dwelling is forward of Ivy House, it is positioned on the site to provide, as recognised in the officer appraisal, a gradual change to the alignment of the dwellings with the road. The existing site forms part of a large curtilage to Ivy House and is occupied by several residential outbuildings and an area of hard standing. The current site detracts from the overall character and appearance of the area. As identified in paragraph 6.2.1 of the officer appraisal, and the proposed development, therefore, represents an opportunity to provide betterment to the wider landscape. To conclude, we believe that the proposed development fully accords with the development plan and will enhance the character and appearance of the local area. No unacceptable adverse impacts have been identified as arising from this proposal, given the extraordinary times we are living in, with the need to support and strengthen our local construction industry and economy through the provision of housing, never more evident. We commend this proposal to members and respectfully request that it is looked upon favourably. Thank you, Chair, and that's the end of the public speaking statements.
Phew, thank you, Idris. Okay, Philip, I'm coming back to you now to finish your summing up, basically.
Chair, I was coming to a close on that because there's quite a lot to take in here to remember to update on. Some of the points were touched on then in the agent's statement, and to sum up, officers share the agent's comment that they consider this dwelling is a transition between the old part of the settlement and the newer part built below alongside, as highlighted in the photographs supplied by the local member, which have been included today in the presentation. So therefore, in conclusion, officers' recommendation is one of approval. The SAMDEV policy is the key policy. The plan review at this present stage having no weight. And as I touched on earlier, I do bring members' attention to the history of the site and the planning reason for refusal for the previous application for development of this site. Unless it's something you want me to specifically answer, I can, nothing else at this stage.
Thank you, Philip. I'm going to go to the committee now, and then you can have a comeback at the end of the discussion, okay? So now, members of the committee, can we now make their comments? The lister will indicate who's next to speak. So,
thank you, Chair. We've had an indication from Keith Roberts, but it's to show the plan for planning reference 20/01374/full.
Tim, if you can put that up, please.
Chair, just as that's coming up, can I say that I have been unable in the meeting chat bar, and I have tried contacting Idris directly to register to speak. It just keeps saying not sent.
Here we go.
Okay, we'll put you next then, Councillor Hunt, okay?
And Chair, that's all I requested, was to see the application that we're actually supposed to be looking at, not the previous one of 2019.
This is the one you want to look at anyway, Keith.
Yeah, that's the one I want to look at. Yeah, that's the one. And could I just have a floor plan for it as well?
Okay, Tim, you got a floor plan?
Thank you. No.
No, is that the one?
No, that's it. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
But yeah. Okay, if Councillor Hunt's indicated to speak, Councillor Hunt, you'd like to?
Hey, Chair. Yeah, sorry, I'm having an absolute nightmare today with everything, but there we go. I kind of feel as though, in a way, we're between a rock and a hard place. This, and I'm just going to look to Philip. I think just so that I can get my ducks in a row in my own head. I mean, obviously, I think the other floor plan was or the other design was shown to show how much in size it has reduced, and I'm not talking about inches on our screen. I'm talking about actually on the footprint of the site, and it has indeed reduced. Now, obviously, there's a lot of local objection to this. One would expect that. When we didn't have a 5-year land supply, a lot of people managed to slide a lot of stuff under the door that we didn't like, wasn't in proper areas and whatnot. But just this is in an infill, and I want Philip to correct me on any of these points afterwards if I'm wrong. And essentially what you're saying, Philip, then is that we need to be very careful with this, because we have established the right for a property to exist on this site by nature of the last refusal. The last refusal being that we refused it in terms of scale and design. Obviously, they've worked with officers and they've reduced the scale and the design to a point where officers are now happy to approve it. And obviously, it was refused last time because of those. Would I be right in thinking that if depending on what decision's made, if this would go to the inspector, we'd find it incredibly difficult to defend, because we have established the right, or we've not. In our last rejection, we didn't put a reason forward by way of we didn't believe this infill should go ahead, but merely because the scale and design weren't correct, and now they are. Could you answer that for me, Philip, please?
Yes, to you, Mr. Chairman. I would share those thoughts, Councillor. And if the could you go to this site plan, please, showing the site? Because reference is made in one of the objections from one of the parish councils regarding another site where issues were raised. That I've looked at that site. It was at another part of the village and was not considered infill. Now, officers appreciate and understand the objections with regards numbers. However, when looking at something like that, we also need to look at where the site is located. The site referred to in one of the parish council objections, with 2 dwellings which officers did refuse, was on the edge of the village and therefore not strictly speaking considered infill and had a visual impact. Officers consider this site is purely down to scale and mass, hence the reason for the previous refusal, and I'll let members judge themselves whether they consider the current application has addressed that matter. As the agent pointed out in his statement, this proposed dwelling represents a transition between the old and the new, as I pointed out during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Has anybody else indicated interest?
Thank you, Chair. No one else has indicated to speak.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll just give you a few seconds, see if anybody wants to come forward to speak on this, which is had a lot of debate on it, not debate, but a lot of reading and comments. Nobody still wants to speak? Okay. Nobody's
Chair, in which case, if I may,
yeah,
and it is, you know, with a heavy heart, I do understand the concern of the local residents and the local members, and I'm sure I'll get into trouble for it, but hey, there you go. I'm going to move the officer's recommendations. I think this is it is an example of infill. It is an example of where the applicant has listened and reduced to the point where officers who weren't happy with it before are now happy with it. I don't see any grounds to reject this that wouldn't be flung back at us by an inspector. In all honesty, I am sympathetic, but I think in terms of planning, I think we have to go with this. So I'm going to move that we accept the officer's recommendations.
Well, I have the same thoughts as well, so I shall second it with the same thoughts as well, but with the new houses being built, the infill has been created in itself. That's a question mark which I think parish councils were going for as well. But I shall second for it to be for approval as well. So in that case, if there's no more comments.
Excuse me, Chair. Councillor D and Councillor Jones have indicated they wish to speak.
Okay, Councillor D.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Pauline D. I did try to come in, but it wouldn't send. I fully support what the local members are saying because and the parish councils, because too often they're, it appears to them and to me that riding roughshod over local opinions, and I couldn't possibly it was a forced infill on us because of not having the 5-year land supply. Those other houses were built. So I just find I couldn't support it, and I think they put up very good relevant planning objections, and I'm sure if we could get this overturned, I'm sure that the objections that have been put forward by the local people, the parish councils and the local members, this could be defended. So I couldn't possibly support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor D. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I've driven through Bournemouth Heath and Walford Heath on a regular basis. I can't see a problem with this building going up. They've built in other places there. We need to create more houses, so I would support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Does anybody else want to speak or having problems indicating to speak? Idris, is anybody indicated?
There's no further indication, Chair.
Okay, so we've had the debate such as it was. So I shall move. So there. So yep. So if there's no more speakers, please can I have a second, which we've had, Vince and myself. So now we'll take the vote. So Idris, if you'd like to take the vote, that would be good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members again, to only vote if they've been present for the whole item. The proposal is to go with officer recommendation to grant permission subject to the conditions as set out in Appendix 1 of the report. So, Councillor Dakin?
For.
Councillor Green?
For.
Councillor D?
Against.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Mosley?
For.
Councillor Roberts?
For.
Councillor Hunt?
For.
And Councillor Wynne?
For.
Yeah, Councillor Allcroft here. I have joined the meeting. I'm sorry I'm late. I had BT outside in a manhole and they chopped me off. Yes, I'll abstain on this one simply because I wasn't there for the whole debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allcroft. Okay, could we have the count, please, Idris?
That's 7 for and 1 against, Chair.
That's what I got. Thank you very much. So that has been passed. Thank you. So now we come to item 11, appeals. Philip, have we got any comments on the appeals?
Well, yeah. Can you give me a minute, please, to gather my thoughts?
Okay, okay.
I didn't think they were that bad, Philip.
Ooh.
They are, as you can see, members will see there's 2 appeal decisions where both appeals were allowed. They were joint on the same day for temporary agricultural workers' dwellings in relation to egg laying units, and as officers have got concerns about the decisions. We don't consider there's an essential need to be on site in relation to egg laying units, but the inspector clearly thought otherwise. And I'll leave you read the decisions and come to your own conclusions. But these applications had been refused in accordance with the scheme of delegation, and they were linked up together because they were both on the same form. And the inspector concluded that he felt they should be allowed. Otherwise, it's been a relatively quiet month with appeal decisions. But I would like to add, we do have a number in the system which officers are currently working on.
Thank you for that. Do any of the members wish to comment on the appeals? Otherwise, we can note them.
Do I take it that there's 2 caravans being allowed there now?
Yes.
Good gosh.
Yes, one.
I think it's the same caravan.
The 2 separate sites, but they're only temporary. They're temporary caravans. They're not permanent. Myself, I was actually at the appeal with the case officer, and I did raise it as a concern regarding temporary. You don't normally renew temporary plan permissions for agricultural workers dwelling. There's either a need or not. These are long-established holdings where the chicken sheds have been there for quite some time. But the inspector obviously didn't share my concerns.
Okay. Does anybody have other comments on the appeals?
Well, just let's hope that, you know, the next planning after the next election in May, that the councillors will you know, will be cognizant with you know, what has been decided by the planning inspector. If they come forward and they want to build a house at you know, that, you know, it's obviously a great need, you know, etc. When, you know, it is, you know, just renewal of temporary site allocation.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. Right, if there's no more comments on the appeals, date of the next meeting to note. The date of the next Northern Planning Committee will be held at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, the 15th of September. That concludes the agenda. I will now close the live meeting and ask the committee officers to end the live events. Tim?